Now when I was a little boy, so my mother told me, Timmy, hey, haul away, we'll haul away, Joe. That if I didn't kiss the girls, me lips would grow all moldy. Timmy, hey, haul away, we'll haul away, Joe. Up.
The ancestors of the gaff rig vessels you see sailing today were not toys, were not the vanities of the wealthy. They were the working craft of fishermen, traders, pilots, and privateers. They were tradesmen's tools, in essence, the things men used to earn a living. True, but then who does not look upon a gaff rig schooner and not start dreaming of the South Seas, of gin-clear waters, of swaying palm trees and girls in grass skirts? Or look upon a stout pilot cutter of the English Channel and hear the roar of howling gales and imagine scenes of high seas heroism. Or perhaps you are recalling the halcyon days of your youth, when you sailed a little beetle cat on the sparkling waters of Buzzards Bay. The gaff rig is beautiful, romantic. Let us not deny that. The precise genealogy of the gaff rig is unknown. Probably the oldest rig known to man is the square rig, which dates back to antiquity. This is just as it sounds, a big square cloth hung from a yard supported by a mast. This was the rig of the much-feared Viking longboats. And the square rig would persist through the centuries, culminating in the graceful clipper ships of the 19th century. A variation of the square rig is the lug rig. The Chinese had their version of the lug rig in the form of a junk rig. Another variation is the lateen sail of the Arab dhows. In European waters, the French developed large lug rig vessels, the Biscaynes of Brittany, which were amazingly fast. The lug rig is similar to the square rig except that the sail is set fore and aft, alongside the mast rather than before it. Also, it is peaked. That is, the sail is higher aft of the mast than it is in front of it. For northern European waters, the lug rig was, however, rather unwieldy, as those waters are subject to frequent gales. So the lower forward end of the sail, the throat, would be attached behind the mast by a set of jaws, and the luff, or the leading edge of the sail, would be laced to the mast or attached with hoops, and there would now be two halyards, a peak and a throat, to properly set it. All of this added much needed control to the sail, making it far more manageable when the breeze got up. Headsails would also be added, often two, turning it into a gaff rig cutter, a rig both stout and manageable, but powerfully efficient as well. Hull forms evolved too. Generally, the gaff rig combines with a long-keeled vessel of moderately heavy displacement. In some cases, the result was a perfect dovetail of form and function, an amazingly fast and seaworthy craft which gratified her owners with pride and profit. Yet a quick survey of the sailing yachts of today reveals that the gaff rig has fallen out of favor. Talk to most any yachtsman and they will probably regard the gaff rig as outdated, something for enthusiasts who like antiques, not for actual ocean cruising. And while there are distinct advantages to the Bermudan rig, and which are the reasons for its immense popularity today, there are also advantages to the gaff rig, which all too often go unmentioned. In any case, there appears to be a good deal of interest in the gaff rig, particularly in the mechanics of setting up and handling this rig. I originally cut a video on the subject and it continues to get views on YouTube. It was one of my earliest videos, however, so it was rather crude. I thought it time for an update. Let's set up our gaff mainsail. We start by bending on the sail. First we lash it at the peak, and then at the throat. And then in between, I use row bands, which are short spans of rope, think rope bands, to bend the head to the gaff. You can also use hitches here. Next we want to bend the luff of the sail to the mast. I use spiral lacing for this. Some gaffers will use mast hoops, and some, again, row bands with peril beads that enable the row bands to easily slide up and down the mast. And we'll do this on a calm day, gradually raising the mainsail and adding on the bands or the spiral lacing as we go. Finally, we bend on the foot, securing the tack and the clew to the boom. Then again in the middle, I could use row bands, but I prefer to use hitches here. And the rope is 1/4 inch Dacron 3-strand. And finally bring the main to full hoist. Nice. With our gaff mainsail now bent on and ready to go, let's go out for a sail. I'll begin by lubricating the gaff and the boom jaws. I find the best lubricant is beef tallow, which you can order off Amazon. After releasing the main sheet, I'm going to pick the boom up off the boom gallows using the topping lift. That's what I'm tensioning right now, so that the boom and sail can swing free while I raise it. Generally, you'll raise the gaff in a horizontal position or slightly peaked, with the after end angled up, and you'll pull on both the peak and the throat halyards together. Once the throat has reached full hoist, I'll belay the peak halyard and give a last few good tugs on the throat halyard to tension the luff. At this point, the mainsail is set scandalized. That is, the leech is still loose because the peak halyard has not been tensioned. This pulls approximately half the power out of the sail, and thus is an easy way to power and depower the sail without actually raising and lowering it, which can be useful when sailing on and off of a mooring or up to a pier. Then tension the peak until the crease between the throat and the clew disappears and the sail pops into its shape and is now delivering power. So now we're out sailing along, but then the breeze picks up, so much so that our big beautiful gaff mainsail is given a little too much power, in which case we're going to have to tie a reef in to shorten sail. If she's not already close hauled, I'll helm down to bring her up with the wind approximately 60 degrees off the bow, and then I'm going to lash the tiller down so that the rudder is trying to steer the boat back up into the wind. So effectively she's hove to. I'll take up on the headsail sheets to prevent them from flogging. Next, I tension the boom topping lift again, just as we did when raising the sail. Next, I'm going to ease off on the halyards, beginning with the peak, so I'll scandalize it a bit, and then ease off on both the peak and the throat, until the sail is lowered down to the desired reefing points. At this point, I'm just putting a first reef in, so I want to lower the sail enough so I can get the hook on the boom jaws through the tack kringle of the first reef. Next, we have to tension at the clew kringle by pulling on the clew reefing line. This can be quite a haul when the wind is up, but I find with the helm lashed down, as we've done, what will happen is the boat will fall off the wind and the sails will fill. She'll gather some speed and then steer back up into the wind, causing the mainsail to luff. This will give you an opportunity to pull the clew line nice and tight. Finally, we want to tie our reef points in to tidy things up so we don't have a big bag of sail hanging beneath the boom and obstructing vision. Then it's back on the halyards, heave away on the throat, peak up, coil down, and the job is done. I have 3 sets of reef points in my mainsail. This enables me to keep the boat adequately canvassed in conditions ranging anywhere from a zephyr to around 30 knots. As I get into gale conditions, however, the mainsail will have to come down, be lashed to the boom, which in turn will be lashed to the boom gallows. And in its place, I'll run up a small jib-headed storm trysail. When conditions moderate, it's time to shake the reefs out. You just reverse the process. Release your reef points, your clew reefing line, undo the tack kringle, and heave away on the halyards. Generally, you don't have to round up into the wind to do this. You can do this while you're still sailing along on your course. The gaff rigger cannot have a fixed backstay like a Bermudan rig. This is because a fixed backstay would prevent the gaff from crossing the centerline unless the sail was lowered first. Hence, the gaffer will have two backstays on either side of the mainsail, and each backstay will have running tackle, such that the windward backstay can be tensioned, while the leeward backstay is slacked off so that it does not interfere with the set of the mainsail. As with the Bermudan rig, we'll start our jibe by sheeting in the mainsail. This will serve two purposes. One is it'll help to control the jibe, that is, prevent the boom from suddenly taking a wide and quick swing across the center line of the boat, which can do damage in strong winds. But also, when the main is sheeted in tight, it acts as a backstay. And as I'm hauling in on the main sheet, I'm also taking up tension on the slack leeward backstay, so that it will be brought up to tension just before she jibes. And just before the main and boom come across the center line, I'll release the weather backstay so it doesn't crash into it, as you just witnessed in the case of that unexpected jibe. So let's watch a jibe maneuver except in windier conditions. So again, I'm hauling in on the main sheet, and then take up slack on the lee backstay. Still can't get that tight because the mainsail's in the way. So take up more on the main sheet. Keep going on the main sheet. It's almost pulled to the center line. Pull that lee backstay tight. Now I'm just about to come around, so I'm going to release the weather backstay so that when the boom jibes, jibe ho, it doesn't slam into a tight backstay. Then release the main, ease off the main, move your headsail around, and the job is done. Talk to most yachtsmen of today about the gaff rig, and probably one of the first things they'll tell you is that gaffers can't go to windward. That, of course, is untrue. However, it is true that, all things being equal, the gaff rig boat will be slower working to windward than her Bermudan rig sisters. There are three reasons for this. One is that the gaff rig is lower aspect. That is, a gaff sail is shorter and wider than a Bermudan sail, as most of the power or lift comes from the leading edge of the luff of the sail when working to windward. Naturally, having a shorter luff means less forward driving power when close hauled. Second is the increased windage of the gaff rig relative to a modern Bermudan rig. This arises from the low-tech nature of the gaff rig, which uses blocks and tackles for mechanical advantage on halyards. This means a lot more rope aloft, all of which creates drag the minute the wind gets forward of the beam. Finally, the gaff rig really only suits a vessel of moderately heavy displacement and with a long keel. While such a vessel may have legendary seakeeping qualities, it's not going to be nearly as efficient when working to windward as a more modern hull form, with a deep fin keel and a spade or partially skegged rudder. Generally speaking, you're going to give up about 10 degrees of pointing angle with a gaffer compared to a similar Bermudan rig vessel. So in fair conditions, if our Bermudan rig vessel steers 45 degrees from the true wind, our gaffer will comfortably sail at 55. In that case, the Bermudan rig vessel will have to sail 1.41 nautical miles to make 1 nautical mile good to windward, while the gaffer is going to have to log 1.74 nautical miles. That's in ideal conditions. Like the Bermudan rig vessel, the gaffer will also have to steer at a wider angle to the wind when the wind builds, and in particular when the waves kick up. She will have to foot, as the saying goes. I find with my own boat, I can continue to work to weather in conditions up to about 4/7 or 25 to 35 knots in open water, albeit at which point she'll only be steering about 75 degrees from the wind, and I'll sometimes have difficulty getting her through a tack, but I can still work to windward slowly. So the gaffer may be a bit slower to windward than her Bermudan sister, but nevertheless, I have tacked my 8-ton engineless gaff rig cutter through many challenging waterways, such as in through the town cut leading into St. George's in Bermuda. To date, I have never seen a modern performance cruising boat even attempt to sail through the town cut. In fact, the only boat I know of which routinely sails in and out of St. George's is a local boat, a Cullen Archer type Tahiti ketch, which belongs, or at least used to belong, to the Sailmaker on the island. That boat is also gaff rigged. Arguably one of the greatest advantages of a gaff rig over a conventional Bermudan rig is the ability to fly a topsail, which is just as it sounds. It's a sail that flies on top of the mainsail. This sail can deliver quite a bit of power, as it's set way up high, which, particularly in light airs, is where most of the wind is. Also, it can be made of much lighter cloth than the mainsail, as it will only be flown in light to moderate wind conditions. There are several arrangements for flying a topsail on a gaffer. Some gaffers, such as the clip from the Jolly Breeze you just saw, has a separate top mast which is stepped on top of the mainmast from which the topsail is flown. My own boat has a pole mast, and so the topsail will be bent to a topsail yard, and also along the foot will be a jack yard, so that the clew of the topsail can extend past the peak of the mainsail. There are 3 control lines to a topsail. The topsail halyard, which will attach generally at the balance point of the topsail yard, a sheet which will attach to the jack yard, which will go through a fairlead at the peak of the gaff, and then be directed through a turning block by the throat, and then down to the deck, and finally the downhaul, which is used to keep the luff tight, and so as to get a good set on the topsail. Usually you'll raise the topsail on the lee side of the mainsail, hauling it up by the halyard and keeping some tension on the downhaul until you get it up 2 blocked, then take up on the downhaul and then sheet it in, and away you go. That said, however, I haven't flown my topsail in years. In fact, I no longer have it rigged. That's for 2 reasons. One is my own boat does pretty well in light airs as it is, and also the topsail adds quite a bit more sticks and string, and it's rather complicated to manage, particularly being single-handed. Thus the rather cursory treatment here. Perhaps if this video gets a lot of views, I'll dig out the topsail, rig it, and do a separate video on handling a gaff topsail. To the uninitiated, the gaff rig vessel might appear comparable to an antique car. It's something for enthusiasts, collectors, something you'll love and polish and tinker with, and occasionally take out for a Sunday spin. I would contend, however, that this comparison is incorrect. Gaff rig vessels are at the end of a long evolutionary line in ship design, of working small craft in particular. Generally, these vessels needed to be swift sailors, manageable in wide or constricted waterways, and seaworthy enough to stand up to whatever the ocean threw at them. Remember, these vessels operated long before satellite-assisted weather forecasting, GPS positioning, or surface and air search and rescue capabilities. The working gaffer had to inspire the confidence of her skipper and crew that they would make it home alive to collect their paychecks. Any blue water sailor today understands that once well offshore, even with all the present-day safety technology, he's still pretty much on his own. Thus, the working gaffer of yesterday naturally converts itself to the blue water cruiser of today. Judging by YouTube view counts, quote-unquote living off the grid seems quite popular these days. If you are going to take to the sea, the gaff-rigged vessel gets you much closer to that ideal than the modern vessel. That's firstly because the gaffer is much more simple. She does not rely on lots of highly specialized parts, as the working gaffers of yesterday were constructed locally with local materials. They did not have the benefit of today's global supply chains. The gaffer uses primitive technologies, such as blocks and tackles for mechanical advantage. The spars are usually wooden and can be constructed or repaired with hand tools. The gaffer was designed to be self-sufficient at sea, because she had to be. Of course, simplicity does not always equate to convenience. Generally, the gaffer is more challenging to sail. She frequently requires that you get off your duff and up on deck, which is healthy outdoor activity, I say, though admittedly not always welcome at 0200 on a dark and stormy night. The best arguments for a gaffer today, however, I think exist on a philosophical level. But then, doesn't all cruising under sail? I mean, if you just want to get to the other side of an ocean, commercial jet planes are the clear choice. What's distinctive of the gaffer compared to jet planes or modern cruising yachts is that the gaffer predates nature-conquering machines, and as such she embodies the humility of working men who knew no such unnatural advantages. The gaff rigger does not and cannot defy the sea. Rather, like a species of seabird, she lives within it, adapting her ends to whatever nature has on offer. This is what makes the gaffer naturally beautiful, what makes her look like a real seaboat. A look that will have a few of us, myself included, casting off mooring lines and sensible advice for a life of high seas adventure.